Hello, Assalamualaikum, and a very good day I bid to all our viewers and dedicated teachers out there who have kindly tuned in to our webinar session for today on the Johor English Digital Learning Resources YouTube channel. We are definitely very proud to present to you a very special topic for today in an effort to continue our series of webinars held by JEDLR so far, and hopefully today we can shed some light upon an important topic of discussion among teachers currently, which is classroom-based assessment or pentaksiran bilik darjah. The title of our webinar for today is Classroom-Based Assessment Insights Unveiled. Before we proceed with our discussion for today, allow me to introduce myself. I am an English teacher in SMK Pasir Gudang. I am Emira Nabila binti Ramli, and I will be your moderator for today. I would first like to provide our audience with a few gentle reminders to ensure that we get the best experience throughout this whole webinar session. First and foremost, we need to ensure that we are using a stable internet connection for optimum viewing. Next, as viewers, you are welcome and encouraged to post questions in the comment section of this YouTube channel. So don't forget to drop your inquiries in order for our speakers to address your questions and concerns after the webinar. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please feel free to do so and give us a thumbs up. And with that being said, last but not least, there will also be a question and answer session right after the sharing session by our speakers. So again, do leave your questions and your comments in the comment section of this YouTube channel in order for us to select and to post to our speakers for today. By the way, I would also like title to receive following the polls steps. Step number one is simply watch this live webinar right until the end. And number two, after this session ends, we will share with you a QR code for attendance. So simply scan the QR code and go to the link. Last but not least, it is for you to enter or key in your attendance in the Google form, and you will then earn your professional development attendance credit, and it will be as simple as that. So do stay tuned to watch until the end. Right, before we dive deeper into our discussion for today about today's topic, I would like to just present you with the objectives of our webinar for today. The first objective is for us to understand that this webinar is to create awareness among teachers, not only in Johor, but also all over Malaysia, regarding the importance of conducting classroom-based assessment as a means of developing and building students' potential. This is especially true when this time round we are experiencing a time assessment has somehow taken precedence over the conventional type examination or summative assessment that we are so used to previously. Secondly, it is to provide teachers with both the theoretical and the practical approaches in the implementation of classroom-based assessment. So this is especially true when this time round we are experiencing a time All right. There was a technical glitch just now. The weather in Johor right currently, we are experiencing raining cats and dogs most of the time. So I would like to apologize for that. So right now, I would like to introduce our first speaker, our first panelist for today, Teacher Pushpa. Do we have Teacher Pushpa?
Hi, thank you, moderator. Hello,
Hi.
everyone.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Okay.
Okay,
How
I'm
are
so
you?
glad to be with all of you. I'm fine, Emira. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm fine. Just a bit having a
Okay,
bit of a problem just now. Okay, but never mind. We are back here right now. So I would like to
okay,
introduce
thank you.
Teacher Pushpa right now. She's from SMK Dato Bentara Dalam Segamat, and these are her awards or accolades that she has received so far. So she is the winner of Anugerah Kajian Tindakan Penyelidikan Pendidikan Kebangsaan kali ke-15 2019. She's also the CEFR Master Trainer for the Johor State Level 2019. She is the second runner-up for Seminar Pembentangan Kajian Tindakan Peringkat Negeri Johor 2018. She is also the English Language Master Teacher and the Johor English Language Panelist, in which she is the gatekeeper for JEDLR Form 5. So definitely there's a lot to learn from Teacher Pushpa. You have a lot of experience, right?
Okay, I'll try my best, Emira. We are actually
Okay.
like learning from one another, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
So thank you, Teacher Pushpa. We will see Teacher Pushpa shortly after this. Our second panelist that we have is Cikgu Choong Yit Wie from SMK Tunku Abdul Rahman Putra Kulai. How are
Hi,
you,
good
Cikgu Choong?
afternoon. I'm doing fine. Hi, Miss Emira. How are you
Hi.
doing? Nice to meet you
Fine.
all, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you for agreeing to have this session with us today. So
It's
I
my
would like to
pleasure.
present, yes, thank you. So I would like to present your awards and your accolades that you have received so far here. Teacher Chong is the Johor English Digital Learning Resources Panelist. She is Ketua Pentaksir Kawasan Kulai for PT3 2018 until 2019. She has received her Excellent Service Award or Anugerah Perkhidmatan Cemerlang 2019, and she is the Technical Officer for District Level English Carnival Poetry Recitation for 2019 18 until 2021. So thank you for being with us today, Cikgu Chong.
Welcome.
Okay, so right now, we are not going to waste any more time. We are going to start listening to Puan Pushpa's sharing. I believe she has a lot to share with us today. So the stage is yours, Puan Pushpa.
Thank you, Miss Moderator. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, now let us see the topic of today's webinar. Classroom-based assessment or classroom assessment. What is it all about? Yes, it is a process of collecting information about people's progress in the classroom. It is also known as an ongoing assessment, which is planned, implemented, and reported by teachers, of course, in order to determine individual people's mastery level. Now, this classroom-based assessment has formative assessment as well as summative assessment. Right, under formative assessment, we have assessment for learning in order to assess people's progress for learning, and we also have assessment as learning to assess people's progress as learning. And these two assessments are carried out throughout the teaching and learning process in order to provide immediate feedback as well as to assess the mastery level of the learning standards. And under summative assessment, we have assessment of learning in order to assess people's progress of learning. And this is to be done at the end of an instructional period, for example, mid-semester examination, year-end examination. And this is actually to assess the mastery level of learning standards, unit, or perhaps some units. Now, in order to conduct classroom-based assessment, we can actually use some methods, which are known as the methods of classroom-based assessment. Now, first of all is the observation. As for the observation, we as teachers, we can observe the students' performance, their involvement during the assessment, as well as other learning activities. We can also see the type of values or behavior that they are showing. okay, throughout the learning process. As well as we also should be able to observe the students, okay, whether they need, okay, the amount of support as well as the amount of support that they are giving to other group members, especially when they are dealing with group tasks. Now, as for a written part, we can actually see the choice of words, the phrases, sentences, essays, or perhaps the mini projects or reports, presentation materials, written responses in order to be used as a method of assessment. For oral, we can also, okay, assess the speaking task, Q&A session involving students, discussions, oral responses, or perhaps presentation. At times, we can also plan to have more than one method of assessment in order to conduct classroom-based assessment. Now, let us move on to the next one. Classroom-based assessment has performance standards. Now, these performance standards refer to 6 levels of people's progress about listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Now, these 6 levels have specific descriptors in order to determine the people's performance level as well as to indicate their progress in learning. Now, how are we going to obtain these specific descriptors? Definitely, it is in our DSKP. So now it is our task, it is our responsibility in order to unpack our DSKP according to the form that we are actually carrying out the classroom-based assessment. Okay, now let us see how the DSKP is unpacked. For example, Form 5 speaking skill, the descriptors and performance levels are actually extracted from the DSKP. Now, under these descriptors as well as the performance level, we have altogether 6 levels. Pupils under level 1 can display minimal ability in order to ask about as well as communicate information. So here in level 1, the most important phrase here is minimal ability. Not only minimal ability to ask about as well as to manage interaction and also use registers. Perhaps in this situation, the pupils can use, okay, words, phrases, or perhaps chunks of sentences. They also show minimal ability in order to explain the point of view or feelings, of course, with a lot of support. Support here, what I'm trying to say is actually would be the stimuli or the talk partner as well as the teacher. Now, as for level 2, the key element here is actually they can display some ability in order to ask about and communicate information. They also show some ability to manage interaction and also use registers. For example, words, phrases, and some simple sentences which are grammatically correct. They can also explain a point of view, feelings, but of course, with a lot of support, perhaps from the stimuli or the talk partner. As for level 3, this level of students can communicate information adequately. And okay, the best part is they started using paraphrasing and also rephrasing as one of the skills of conversation. They can use registers appropriately. And in this part, they can explain as well as justify with reasons. For level 4, they can communicate and provide some relevant details in their conversation. They can manage, okay, by paraphrasing and rephrasing. They can use registers appropriately, justify without giving explanation or, okay, with the explanation. And one more important thing here is they can sustain communication occasionally compared to level 3. As for level 5, they can provide a lot of relevant details. Of course, okay, they can apply the paraphrasing and rephrasing skill. They can use registers appropriately. They can explain by giving justification or bringing in some reasons in order to support the argument. And most importantly, they can sustain the communication most of the time. As for level 6, they will give a lot of relevant details easily, meaning that they are the independent users of the language. Besides paraphrasing, rephrasing, the use of registers appropriately, they can also explain and justify, and they can sustain the communication at all times. Another beautiful element of these level 6 peoples are they can display exemplary model, meaning that the language used and they can also be the guide, okay, to other students. So this is how we have to unpack the descriptors based on the performance level. in order to carry out our classroom-based assessment. Now, let us see one of the examples of the task. Learning Standard 2.1.1, explain information on familiar topics from diagrams, charts, and so on. The task is a pair work where they have to discuss the information in pairs. Now, let's look at the example of an excerpt. This is actually a transcript involving two candidates, candidate 1 and candidate 2. Let us see how candidate 1, responded towards the conversation. He started off the conversation with minimal ability to communicate. We can see examples of utterances, I talk, I talk, and I talk. So this shows that he is showing minimal ability in order to communicate. He also introduced point 1 with minimal ability to explain and manage the interaction. For example, he started using the same utterances again and again. For example, good point, good point. So this shows that he is struggling with his words. He also showed minimal ability with a lot of support. In fact, he also mentioned that he wanted his talk partner to help him out. For example, you say lah. And towards the end of the interaction, he also showed minimal ability with a lot of support, and again he wanted his talk partner to help him out. He also did say that you say lah. Compared to candidate 2, he introduced the topic and he asked about the point. For example, what is your point? Of course, with a lot of support from the stimuli. He restated what has been mentioned by candidate 1, and he also tried his level best in order to manage the interaction with some ability to explain, as well as asking about the point. He also introduced the second point with some ability to explain and manage, and he also introduced the third point and again asked about the point. And of course, he also needed a lot of support, not from the talk partner, but from the stimuli. So here we can see that candidate 2 is slightly better than candidate 1. Towards the end of the conversation, again, candidate 2 showed some ability to explain and manage the interaction. And again, he asked about the point. So, all in all, what we can conclude based on the features that are displayed over here is that candidate 1 falls under performance level 1 because of minimal ability as well as needed a lot of support, whereas candidate 2 falls under level 2 because of some ability in order to explain and manage the interaction. Now, let us see one more example. This is also another sample script involving two more students, candidate 1 and 2, in which candidate 1 introduced the topic by paraphrasing the topic from the stimuli. So from here, we know that candidate 1 is better than what we have seen just now, And he also introduced the first point with some relevant details, And he managed to explain, justify by giving reasons. For example, because the student leader can do duty properly. So we look at all the can-do statements throughout their conversation. He also managed to ask about the point when he said that, what do you think? And then towards the end of the conversation, he managed to interact again by providing some relevant details. He also managed to paraphrase point number 2. And he explained and of course justified by giving reasons. Besides explaining feelings, he also asked about point number 3, which indirectly tells that he is allowing candidate 2 in order to get involved in the interaction. And towards the end of the discussion, he managed to sustain his communication, which is occasionally when he noticed that candidate 2 is struggling with his words. Now let us see candidate 2. He paraphrased the topic which is uttered by candidate 1. And he also paraphrased point 1, but sadly he never explained. And he introduced point 2, right? The better point is he managed to communicate adequately by giving explanation as well as justification. And he also asked about that point. And this is actually another point to consider, the can-do statement to take into account in order to actually put the peoples, accordingly. Right. Now, towards the end of the conversation, candidate 2 managed to communicate adequately as he could explain his point of view, but again, he can't actually sustain because he did say that he can, with the pauses there. So based on the description that we have discussed, it could clearly be viewed that candidate 1 falls under performance level 4 because of the features that we have taken from the descriptors of the performance level, whereas candidate 2 falls under performance level 3. Okay, now this is another task, Learning Standard 2.1.5, to explain and justify own feelings or those of others. This is an individual task. The situation goes like this. You're working in a company where your wife or husband is the boss. Explain and justify your point of views, your feelings and feelings of others. Here, the teacher's focus is actually whether the students can explain and justify their point of view, whether they can communicate their feelings, the use of registers, as well as to sustain communication. Now, in order to conduct this task, actually I use wheel of name as a technique. Here, the teacher's part is actually to spin the wheel, whereby the students will have to be alert, and the moment they notice that, okay, the arrow shows their name, immediately they will have to start off with their speaking task. So it went on very well because they were very alert towards the assessment period. Okay, now let us analyze, okay, one of the sample scripts. Now, if you were to read the sample script here, I are working in a company where my wife. Okay, so from here we can see that this candidate needed a lot of support from the stimuli, and this, okay, support is directly lifted. He didn't even change the grammatical item, taken from the situation. So therefore we can see that he needs a lot of support. He in fact, okay, pauses a few times. For example, I want, the boss. So these kind of things give us a picture that he is actually showing minimal ability in order to communicate. And therefore, this candidate falls under performance level 1. Let us move on to the next one. He is slightly better than performance level 1 because if you were to see the grammatical feature, even though he has taken the, phrases and sentences from the stimuli, he managed to change according to the context. I am working in a company where my wife or husband is the boss. So he is actually doing a smart lifting here by changing the grammatical component. And he has quite a number of simple structures which are grammatically correct. My wife, boss, so don't care, in my opinion. So from the phrases that this candidate has used, we can see that, okay, he showed some ability to communicate as well as manage the interaction. In fact, he also explained the point of view. He used the phrase in my point. So from here, we know that candidate 2 is slightly better than candidate 1, and therefore he is given performance level 2. Now let us see the third one. This one, okay, the candidate can communicate adequately by using registers appropriately. For example, I can check the company account. And he also managed to interact by paraphrasing his utterances compared to what he had done, okay, in the beginning of the conversation. He can also explain and justify with reasons. Okay, for example, I think this is interesting for me because. So clear, okay, it is a clearer picture for us to know that this candidate is justifying his point of view. Okay, and the sad part is actually he has a few pauses in his interaction. He can't actually sustain, and therefore this candidate falls under performance level 3. Now let us see the next one. This candidate can communicate with some relevant details, use registers appropriately. For example, I work in a company. He's not repeating the same phrase in another utterance. For example, I can manage the company. So that shows that, this candidate can use registers appropriately in order to manage his interaction. He can also paraphrase, explain, and justify with a few reasons, not one, but a few reasons. For example, because I can always help her, because I can give many ideas. So my family. So this kind of sentences give us a picture that this candidate can actually justify all his points, and he also can sustain communication occasionally because he doesn't have many pauses, and therefore this candidate falls under performance level 4. Okay, any question, audience? Do you have any questions? The most important part here is to actually unpack our DSKP. We have to look into all the descriptors which are put in the performance level so that we can easily assess our students. Okay, let us move on to the next part. This is also another unpacking, but here our focus is reading skill. As for reading skill, we have some key features which are extracted from the descriptors of the performance level. For example, main ideas, specific details, use of dictionary, and whether they can identify the meaning of unfamiliar words, global issues, attitude or opinion of the writer, then the typical features. Okay, for level 1, the key element here is actually minimal understanding or minimal ability in order to use dictionary, and they can guess very few unfamiliar words, right? So the most important word or phrase in this level is actually minimal understanding or minimal ability. And another point to consider is they need a lot of support. For level 2, okay, they show some understanding compared to level 1. So here the key word is some, and they also need a lot of support. For level 3, they can understand adequately and they can use the dictionary independently and then guess the meaning of the words. And here the key word here is adequately. For level 4, they can understand and respond. So now we can see how the level is progressing from one to another. Okay, in level 4, students can understand and respond clearly, and they can work independently as well as appropriately towards the task given to them. And it is not sometimes, but most of the times. For level 5, they can understand and respond clearly, quite similar to level 4, but this is done at all times compared to level 4. For level 6, the key word here is effectively. So that is actually the formula in order to assess our students, and they can guide others in a given task. So this is how we have to unpack our DSKP, especially the descriptors, so that we can put our pupils according to the respective levels. Okay, now this is one examples of the task. I give this as a flipped classroom activity so that the students could be able to read and digest some of the information before the real assessment is conducted. Now, this is a task LS, okay, 3.2.1. Read a variety of suitable print and digital text to investigate and analyze global issues. Learning Standard 3.1.6. Recognize with little or no support or typical features at word, sentence, and text level. So the task sounds like this. Read the two advertisements on a global issue to investigate and analyze the issue by identifying the main idea with two specific details. They can compare by explaining and justifying the opinions or attitudes shown by the writers. And I also included the typical features by giving them some guidelines in which they have to focus on the language used as well as the tone. Okay, before assigning them to get involved in the task, I gave them some specific words so that at least they know that during the task they can focus on certain elements in order to beat the time. So the phrases, okay, sound global issue, main idea or two specific details, recognizing opinions or attitudes of the writers, as well as the typical features which include language as well as the tone, right? Now, this is conducted as a Jamboard activity, and here I, as a teacher, I used two assessment or methods of assessment. For example, written as well as observation. So as the students get involved in the task, I, as a teacher, I observed their performances. I observed their involvement on how they are interacting with one another and how they are helping one another. All right, now let us move on to one of the sample answers given by the students during the Jamboard activity. This is actually people 1 and also an evidence extracted from the Jamboard activity. So from here, we know that this candidate can investigate and analyze the global issue effectively because she can identify the main idea and provide specific details effectively. That shows that she can understand and respond towards the task because she fulfilled the task requirement by giving two specific details. And not only that, she also supported with some adequate examples, and that shows that she can understand and respond effectively. When we look at the opinion and attitudes, this candidate can recognize by responding effectively because she can make comparisons between the two different texts given to her. She can even get the gist of the text in order to use her own word in order to come up with the writer's opinion. So that shows that she can actually recognize and respond effectively towards the task. What about the typical features? For language, she can identify that the first article is informal, whereas the second one is formal, and she can support with good examples in order to justify her point. The same thing happened in tone. The first article shows a very friendly tone, whereas the second one is a very serious tone because it is a report and it has a lot of facts. She in fact supported with examples. Apart from what we are seeing here, to show that she can recognize and respond towards the task effectively, as a teacher, I observed her during the task. She actually guided the other students when they get involved in this task, and therefore we can actually give this particular student level 6 because of the key feature effectively as well as can guide others. So this is how we are going to use our descriptors in order to put our candidates, our pupils according to the respective levels. Now let us see one more example. This candidate can identify the global issue by investigating and analyzing. All right, when it comes to the main idea, he managed to understand adequately because he just provided one specific detail for each article. He did not actually fulfill the task requirement, meaning to say that fully, because I asked them to at least identify two. So from here, we know that this candidate, tried his level best in order to understand adequately. As for the opinion, it sounds like not really an opinion because if you were to see the sentence, how to avoid from sick. So that does not show, or that does not reflect, the opinion of the writer. So in this part, we can conclude that the candidate does not really understand clearly towards the task given to him. However, towards the end of the task, in which identifying the typical features, this candidate can identify the type of language used correctly. The first one article is informal, second one is a formal one. The same thing goes to tone. The first article is in a very friendly tone, and the second article is written in a very serious tone because it is a report. However, he did not provide example in order to show to others that he can actually understand clearly, and therefore he falls under recognizing adequately. So all in all, we can say that this candidate falls under performance level 3. Okay. Now, we are done with the assessment. What is next? Progress record. Why it is needed? Of course, to assess people's progress. This is very, very important, as well as to keep as the evidence because we are conducting classroom-based assessment, and evidence is very, very important in order to do justification of our professional judgment. So progress record is also needed in order to help a teacher to make professional judgment, and also we can use this progress record to justify to respective peoples as well as parents, especially on the reporting day. Now, how are we going to record, or where do we need to record? Of course, we can use a checklist, forms, other appropriate methods, for example, record book or notebook. Now, let us see one of the examples here. This is actually a form which I am using in order to keep my students progress. Here I have the column in order to write the students' names as well as their okay, IC number. And I also have the dates of my assessment, learning standards, as well as the performance level. Okay, and I also have one particular column for term one in order to put their overall performance level. Okay, we have got four candidates, and each and every candidate has performed accordingly. And if you were to look at the first candidate, he has obtained twice, okay, level one, once level three, and the rest of the time level two. So this is the part, okay, a teacher has to play, okay, a very important role in order to do professional judgment. So I basically observed this student, okay, throughout the learning process, and I could see that, okay, most of the time this, okay, candidate falls under performance level two, unless, okay, we have enough evidence in order to support, in order to justify that, okay, he can be in performance level three. Okay, so it is up to a teacher in order to do the professional judgment, as long as we have evidence in order to justify. So the same thing goes to candidate 2 and 3. Now, what happens if we were to come across situation like in candidate 4? Okay, we are now, okay, in a confusion whether to give level 2 or level 3. Okay, so if that is the case, we as teachers, we have to think back what that particular candidate has been doing all the while throughout the learning process or throughout the assessment process. Look at all the can-do statements of these particular students, whether he helped his group members, whether he managed to ask, okay, some questions throughout the learning process, whether he helped other group members in order to complete any task. So these are all the can-do statements that we teachers have to take into consideration, and therefore we can actually do our professional judgment, of course, professionally, and perhaps we might think that, okay, this candidate should fall under performance level 3. So this is how professional judgment has to be done. Again, don't ever total up all these levels and then divide by the number of assessment. There is a big no for that. Do it professionally. That is what we call professional judgment. I hope that we are clear on how to actually unpack our DSKP, especially the descriptors from the performance level as well as the learning standards, so that we can plan our tasks accordingly in order to assess our students. With that, I thank you.
All right, thank you very much to Puan Pushpa. It has been indeed a pleasure to listen to your sharing, because the sharing was definitely very detailed and comprehensive for all our teachers out there to really grasp the concept behind the implementation of classroom-based assessment. I was especially impressed by the amount of interesting classroom-based assessment activities that teacher Pushpa has shared with us today, along with the explanation of the descriptors of pupils' performance levels. Okay, now that we have heard from Puan Pushpa, we are now going to bring onto the stage our second panelist, teacher Choong Yit Wie, an English teacher from SMK Tunku Abdul Rahman, to resume our discussion of today's topic. So please welcome teacher Choong.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Miss Emira and Madam Pushpa, for her wonderful insight. It was really great. So, for my session, I will share some activities I have carried out with my students before sharing its assessments and the performance standard guides for reading and speaking skills. So, like many other teachers out there, I have used a variety of apps and websites to make my lessons more engaging and fun with the students during these challenging times. So as I deliver my lessons, it would be nice to remind myself that we are and can carry out the measurements and evaluations of the CBA of our students' performances at the same time. So regardless if it's in written form, verbally spoken, or perhaps a combination of both. So let's take a look at the activities that I did. So the activities that I'll be sharing today would be matching gap tags, which I use out with my Form 3 students using the liveworksheet.com. So in this activity, my pupil on their own has to silently read a text that consists of 7 gaps, and pupils would need to fill the gaps using only the 7 options provided. So let's take a glimpse through at the content standard, focus, and landing standard of this activity. So the content standard would be 3.1 in which by the end of the lesson, all right, hopefully my pupil can understand a variety of text using appropriate strategies. Its learning standard, on the other hand, would be to understand specific details and information in longer text on an increased range of familiar topics. So the text is an extended reading material which I adapted from the Form 3 textbook, Close Up Unit 4 Special Relationship. So the story this short paranormal story is about a girl named Anna and her pet dog Bablu. So as they were walking back home one day, Anna encountered some events in which she cannot explain. As scared as she was, it turned out to be a dream in the end. So now, in order for my pupil to achieve optimum results, they will have to read and understand specific details such as the setting, a character's characteristics, vocabulary use, and the flows of events. So in the green box, for example, Learning Standard 312, pupils should be able to understand specific details, such as understanding that the dog, Bablu, was taking up defensive measures to protect his owner, Anna. So how do we know that? So the student should be able to understand, should be able to highlight the point, highlight these phrases or words such as barking furiously, clenching, and flashing his white sharp teeth. Another example would be to guess how Anna felt when her dog refused to go away with her when Bablu barked at a long, empty, endless road. So without further ado, let's look at the Form 3 KSSM Performance Standard Guide, which can be found in the DSKP. So as presented by the first speaker, Madam Pushpa, the performance level is divided into 6 different levels, each with its own unique and specific descriptors. There are 3 main descriptors here. In the performance level, namely the ability to understand main ideas or specific ideas of a text, the ability to use the dictionary skills or familiar resources to guess the meaning of unfamiliar words, and last but not least, the ability to provide personal response on writer's attitude or opinion. All right, bear in mind that this is from the DSKP English language from the Form 3. So it would look different than the Form 5. So it is best that we remind ourselves that we analyze and we measure our students' performances based on the form that they are in. So the DSKP is the best friend, is the teacher's best friend. So next. So let's have a quick look on the next part. So the 3 main descriptors here. The keywords for each performance level are written in red. So for instance, in performance level 1, a pupil would hardly understand the main idea or specific details of the text. So pupils with performance level 2 would show limited ability, while level 3 or adequate ability presents an adequate ability to understand the text. So now let's take a look at some of the sample work my students did. Here, the number on the top left-hand side, which is written in red, 1, okay, indicates the final score of my pupil for this activity. So the green box indicates that he has answered or chose the correct answers, correct sentences for the gap, whereas the red one shows the opposite. So the pupil has obtained a score 1 out of 7, in which has clearly reflected that the pupil hardly understands the text in general, even though lots of support was given by the teacher, which is me, myself, or even by his friends during and before the lesson was carried out. And hence, a performance level 1 was awarded. So now, let's take a look at the second sample. The next sample would be performance level 3. All right, performance level 3. In this activity, my pupil displays a good ability in understanding the text. He scored 4 out of 7 corrects, though there were 1 or 2 vocabulary that he wasn't sure of. So for example, in my observation, he was asking his friends around, what was the meaning of flashing? What is the meaning of gaze? I don't understand. So since this student has got 4 out of 7 corrects, So why didn't I award him with performance level 4 instead, since the score is in the middle range, isn't it? Would anyone in the audience would like to make a guess? All right, so let me go through with this. So again, so since this student scored 4 out of 7 corrects, though there were a few vocabularies that he wasn't sure of, so why did I not give him a performance level 4 instead? All right, I'll answer that question then. So this pupil displays an adequate ability in, all right, in providing personal response on the writer's attitude or opinion with some support, which is the third criteria mentioned in the performance standard guide. So an author's attitude or tone is simply his or her feelings about the subjects he or she is writing about. So the writers express the attitudes through the word choice, sentence structures, and figurative language. And as a whole, it is divided into two broad categories: formal and objective, or informal and subjective. So in this case, when I ask my student, I observe him. So for instance, I ask, "Hi Amirul, in your opinion, the structure of this text is formal or informal?" So what is the tone used by the writer in paragraph 2 specifically? So this student hesitated, all right? This student hesitated and answered, informal, maybe? And then after that, he kept quiet as he was unsure of the second part of the question. So I further prompted by saying the tone, perhaps let's say joyful, happy, serious, nervous. So the student heard the word, nervous teacher, nervous. So, and which word or phrases indicates that answer? Do you have any answers to justify? Do you have any support? All right, so long story short, this student requires some support when it comes to providing responses, personal responses on the writer's attitude. All right, this is how we can analyze and measure whether the student is in performance level 3 or performance level 4. Level 3 would require some support, whereas in level 4, he or she can do it independently. All right, so for the next level, I would like to highlight on performance level 6. Performance level 6, one obvious performance would be the pupil with performance level 6 displays an exemplary model language use to the others, and it would exceed the curriculum target. All right. Besides, they are able to display very good ability. They are able to display excellent ability in providing personal response. They have also shown skills in giving or helping his friends in the during the lesson. So let us have a look at this. So as you all can see on the top left hand side, a full grade 10 marks was awarded to this pupil. So he displays an ability in understanding the text and was able to choose the most suitable option for the gap. So other than that, he was also able to guess the meaning of some unfamiliar B2 level words, such as barking furiously and gaze on his own without the support from anyone. All right. So as teachers, we prepare our extra materials. As we prepare some extra reading materials, we can actually go to the language search. We can use the text inspector to check the level of the language itself, of the word itself. Does this fits in together with the ability of the student? So if the student is able to guess out the meaning of the word, or is able to explain the meaning of the words to his friends, then exceptionally, definitely he will be able to get a performance level of 6. So on top of it, definitely during my observation, a teacher knows his student best or her students best, right? So during the class, he was always one of those little advisors or little teachers that other pupils or other friends would come when it's like during the English language class or when it comes to answering the questions. So let's have a look at the next one. For task 2, my focus was my pupils' speaking skill. But before we go deeper into the activities, let's have a look at its content standard, focus, and learning standard once again. The content standard will be 2.4, in which by the end of the lesson, right, once again, hopefully, my pupils can communicate appropriately to a small or large group on familiar appropriately on familiar appropriately to a small or large group on familiar topics. The learning standard, on the other hand, which is 241, is the ability to summarize the main points of a story. So now the topic card. So this is a sample of the topic card I created, all right, I created for my pupil based on the earlier text. So in this activity, pupils will have to work in pairs and discuss the topic given. For instance, what qualities does Anna possess as a pet owner? Right? So the discussion was recorded and uploaded to Padlet or Google Classroom for my later assessments. So from here, I can access my students' performance at my own pace and of course provide them back with my useful feedbacks and opinions on their speaking skills. So for my students, so as a teacher, I would listen and evaluate their recordings based on a few criteria, of course, namely their language skills, their explanation skills, and last but not least, definitely the amount of support they would need, either from the teacher or from their friends. So now let's now let's take a quick view of the descriptors before we continue. We can denote the student's ability based on their responses. All right. The difference between a level 1 and a level 2 response would be that a pupil of level 1 could hardly respond, even, all right, even if a lot of support were to be provided. On the other hand, a pupil with performance level 2 would show limited ability, where the teacher or friend has to give, okay, sorry. Performance level 2 shows limited ability, where the teacher or friend has given him or her a lot of support. All right, one part that we must remember: if the pupil needs to achieve a higher level, he or she would need to provide some personal details and be able to communicate fluently. Of course, minor hesitations as okay, 1 or 2 seconds during when the speech is delivered are acceptable, all right, because they might be nervous, for example, but not too frequent, all right, not too frequent until it might hamper or hinder the listener's understanding. This is an excerpt, all right, this is an excerpt of a performance level 2 and performance level 3 speaker. So let's bear in mind that the question requires them to talk about a quality that Anna possesses as a pet owner, and to give their opinion on other qualities a pet owner should have in real life. So as we can see here, candidate 1 or C1 is of PL2, performance level 2, while candidate 2 is of performance level 3. So C1 began the conversation with a simple pleasantry. C2 replied back, "Good morning, I'm fine, thank you. What do you think about Anna?" "I think she is a loving and also timid girl." So C1 agreed by saying, "Oh, yes, I agree. She is very loving to me too. Do you like her?" So from here, we can tell that C1 did not point out her own first idea. Instead, she made a misunderstanding. She might have misunderstood what C2 was trying to point at. In this case, loving does not refers to the same idea, is not the same idea as liking someone. So in this case, so for the next one, at this point, C1 didn't give much explanation for his first point. The first point was merely just a restatement, all right, a restatement of C2's first point without further development. In other words, C1 has shown limited ability in getting information himself from the text to begin or even sustain the conversation. The hesitation, the pauses, together with the irrelevant questions related to the task, all right, related to the task, signals the limited ability of C1 to find ideas whether from the text itself or get the ideas for support from the friends on how to continue the conversation. C1 has also displayed a limited ability to find and communicate information, plans, ambitions, and even feelings as shown in our next slide. All right. So, for example, yes, me too. I don't like that part. She cried. I think that she is a caring girl too. But you see, she hugged the dog in her arms, even though she cried like a baby there. It was just a dream. All right. What she did was just barely a smart lifting, not even up to the standard of paraphrasing. Okay, not even to the standard of paraphrasing because the sentences were all hanging around. So what happened is C was able to lift minimal ideas from the text, all right, such as hug the dog and cry, which explains Anna's emotion at that moment, but it does not reflect her own idea instead. Merely, it was just a restatement again back to C2's first point. So, however, C1 has failed to relate these details closely to the task given. All right. C2, on the other hand, gave a first point and added an elaboration and some personal response. She mentioned that a pet owner should be responsible by not, all right, by not discarding kittens or puppies away like rubbish by the roadside. Though the choice of words like baby cats and baby dogs and dumping were less suitable, but it did not hinder any misunderstanding. So the conversation continues with C1, though there was a lot of hesitation, pauses, grammar mistakes, all right? These mistakes, however, doesn't hamper the understanding of the meaning. It's just that it once again signals that C1 has a limited ability to communicate fluently. So hence, a performance level of 2 was awarded to C1 and performance level 4 was given, 3 or 4 was given to to my second student. All right, for the next sample, it is between a performance level 4 and level 5 student. If we see here, all right, both students were able to independently give a response to both parts of the question. They coherently delivered ideas. So no pauses there. All right, no pauses with the use of logical markers. Both of them have also presented their ideas in a well explained and justified way. So, however, C2, all right, C2 was awarded with a better performance level. Why? All right, we shall have a quick look at it. It was a more C2 was more effective at summarizing her ideas. So if we look over here, it was more effective at summarizing her ideas, such as the words stronger and more vivid words were used that match the context. So as you can see here, the ones as shown in red, one must be respectful to their furry friends. As the saying goes, feed your pet like an animal, treat it like a person. So the phrases used by C2 were more than just paraphrasing back. He consolidated his point by pointing that pet owners should be empathetic by putting themselves in others' shoes. And the use of logical markers, the appropriate use of logical markers, its registers, how it justified or how it has explained his idea and his point with support and with examples in real life itself has given him a good credit. All right, the next part about this would be all right. So for the above two activities, right, I use Padlet and Live Worksheet to conduct them. They have served as a wonderful repository system for me to grade, record, and store my evidence for CBA. I believe that a lot of teachers are doing the same thing as well. The CBA actually helps a lot in reflecting my pupils' strength, all right, strengths and weaknesses. So if my students finds it difficult, for example, to give out the conversation, I will give him a one-to-one tuition or one-to-one feedback instead later. So during the lesson, I'll be able to see how well they have progressed throughout the year. So, as well as one more part, it helps to avoid the status quo or overconfidence trap. So, most people, including myself, we believe that when we make decisions, we make them in a rational, in an objective way. But the fact is, most of us would carry a certain level of bias, and those biases might influence, all right, might influence a little bit in the choices we make, especially how I make my assessment. So what I will do before and after the assessment, as usual, I will still refer back to the DSKP for the forms I am teaching. And of course, the scheme of work, they are both magical books that carries all the guidelines that I need for my assessments. So some other tools which I have used would be the quizzes and the booklet for the quiz type activities. It stores which questions, how many of them answered it right, how many of them answered it incorrectly, and how I can actually guide them or assess or even guide them through the lessons after this. Because after all, CBA classroom based assessment is an all year long assessment. It's not just a one time, and it helps the students to progress throughout the year and throughout the lesson itself. So in this case, my people love the quizzes and the booklets a lot because the worksheets itself are presented in a more fun and engaging form. Google Classrooms and Classcakes and even Google Meet, for example, those are also some of my favorite teaching tools. It is very user friendly to both teachers and students. It keeps tracks of my students' submission date and scores. Most importantly, yes, it is free of charge, right? So that's all from me now. Thank you, Miss Moderator. Would anyone who have question there? Does anyone would like to pose a question, perhaps?
Yeah. Thank you
Mhm.
to Teacher Chong for sharing with us all the
Thank
wonderful
you.
activities for classroom-based assessment just now, as well as the explanation for the descriptors. I think that your sharing has definitely consolidated the information given by Puan Pushpa just now. Conducting classroom-based assessment for reading is indeed a very challenging task because it's a receptive skill. Maybe right now we can proceed with our Q&A session for both our panelists for today, Teacher Pushpa and Teacher Chong. Okay, probably I can start asking Teacher Pushpa first. If you could share with us, Teacher Pushpa, how do you think teachers can prepare themselves for classroom-based assessment in terms of their readiness as well as the students' readiness? What would be your suggestion?
Okay, thank you, Miss Moderator. That's a good question. Okay, well, in order to make sure that our teachers are ready in order to conduct classroom-based assessment, the first formula here is actually to unpack the SKP. That is very, very important. They have to read through the whatever information available in our DSKP, right? As for classroom-based assessment, we do have focus as well as the learning standards. So the teachers will have to prepare any assessment task based on these learning standards. And thereupon, the teachers have to choose the best methods of assessment in order to assess or in order to conduct the classroom-based assessment. Okay, upon conducting, this is where the teachers will have to fall back to all the descriptors extracted from the performance level. Okay, otherwise, we teachers will have a lot of problems in order to put our candidates or perhaps pupils in the correct performance level. Okay, so all in all, the teachers be ready to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Definitely, there will be a lot of insights which can be unveiled. So, our formula is here unpack the DSKP. Thank you, Ms. Moderator.
Right. Thank you to Puan Pushpa for the wonderful response there. The keyword there is to unpack the DSKP, and that is the most important thing in classroom-based assessment, definitely. Okay, so I have one question right now. So for Teacher Chung, do you find conducting classroom-based assessment daunting for less able learners? How do you help your students understand meaning and context, for example, when you teach them reading, especially for classroom-based assessment? Do we have Teacher Chung there? Okay, probably we can try and have a look at the question given here by one of the audience. Is there any tips to guide the lower intermediate students in their PBD? Would Teacher Pushpa like to answer that question?
Okay, thanks, Miss Moderator. Well, knowing that they are the lower intermediate students, I'm very sure that they need a lot of support. Okay, the first thing is actually to make them be in a comfortable group where they could actually open their heart in order to say something. They can be confident, right, in order to say something. So that is actually one example. If it is done individually, then the teacher will have to play a role very well. The teacher has to be as a facilitator. Let's look at the task. What is our focus? Which skill are we focusing on? For example, reading. If it is reading, then we can always give that particular student a dictionary in order to have some kind of support. At least he has something in order to make a move throughout the assessment. If it is a speaking task, okay, we can always give them some speaking frames. It is also known as the starter, where the students can actually use these starters in order to involve in the interaction. If it is a writing task, we can also give them the writing frames. So these are some of the suggestions in which we can always help our lower intermediate students in order to get involved in our classroom-based assessment to make it as a successful one. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much to Puan Pushpa for the wonderful response that she has given. Definitely detailed and very comprehensive for us teachers. I think I did also hear just now you mentioned we can have their peers helping them as guide as well.
Yeah,
Okay, so thank you, Puan Pushpa, for your response.
most
Okay, right
welcome.
now, I think that we are moving towards the end of our webinar session for today. Thank you to Puan Pushpa and Teacher Chong for their sharing for today. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that before we do end our webinar session for today, I am honored to give credit and show our deepest gratitude and appreciation to our very important people who have shared with us, our distinguished panelists. First of all, Cikgu Pushpa Kandasamy, as well as Cikgu Choong Yit Wie, who have shared their expertise with us for today. We also have backstage our live webinar host, Cikgu Kamarul Arifin bin Rahman, as well as Cikgu Hanif bin Nur Azahar. We also do want to appreciate our Johor English Digital Learning Resources team, as well as the Johor State Education Department, Johor, Malaysia, as they are our backbone. As without everyone in the team, this webinar would not have been possible. All right, as promised earlier on just now, I am presenting on the screen right now the QR code for the attendance, as you can see right now. So you can therefore earn professional development credit by entering the required details in the link provided. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. We have finally reached the end of our webinar session for today, but we do have a special announcement to make, in which there will be a part two of our webinar entitled Classroom Based Assessment Insights Unveiled, whereby we will have two panelists to share practices in the implementation of classroom based assessment. So do look forward to part two of our webinar series on this particular topic coming very soon in October. In the meantime, I would like to convey our deepest gratitude as well to our viewers who have been exceptionally very keen and very eager to learn more about today's topic. So please stay safe, everyone, until we meet again in the next webinar. So see you soon and goodbye.